Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And for many of my listening audience, I talk about knowing your local politics, even more so than your national politics. It is very important for you to pay attention to who you are putting in your city office, in your state offices, in your state departments, your city departments. That includes the mayor, who is also your older person, alderwoman, alderman, who is the president of the aldermanic board. You should know these things. You should know who your comptroller is of your city, your state legislators. You should know and try to have an understanding and a background knowledge of who you elect as your city sheriff. They play an important role in public safety. We should know who the chief of police is. Some of these positions are elected positions, and some of them are appointed. But either way, especially for elected positions, you should really pay attention and have a good knowledge base on who you are electing. And in many of our cities, like Chicago, like Atlanta, Fulton County, even in St. Louis, there is quite a bit of disruption that is taking place with our city leaders. And as you know, here this past May the 16th of 2025, St. Louis had a horrible tornado that caused devastation across the city, and upwards of $1.6 billion worth of damage. Over 8,000 buildings have been destroyed, and it has been a total mess here in the city. And we'll have to see what the city, state, and national government officials are going to do about helping these residents. But in the meantime, we have some brush fires that are taking place in the city of St. Louis, and one in particular has to do with this newly elected sheriff, Alfred Montgomery, and the newly elected mayor, Kara Spencer. These two are not getting along. Kara Spencer is the mayor. She handles the governance of our city. And of course, the sheriff handles the public safety of detainees. And there's been some controversy between the two. So let's get into what is taking place with Mayor Kara Spencer and the newly elected sheriff, Alfred Montgomery. So let's go. St. Louis sheriff ends inmate hospital transport, citing budget cuts. The mayor calls the move ludicrous. This move ends decade-old duty by sheriff's office. Critics say the decision is political and may endanger detainee care. A new controversy is brewing around St. Louis Sheriff Alfred Montgomery, who is under increasing scrutiny after announcing that his office will no longer transport detainees to the hospital, a duty that has been handled by the sheriff's office for decades. The sheriff blamed budget constraints, but critics, including city leaders and his predecessor, argue the move is politically motivated and dangerous. And so this critical service is at risk. So currently, if a detainee in the St. Louis County Jail becomes seriously ill, two sheriff's deputies transport the individual to a hospital, supervise them throughout their stay, even for days or even a week or weeks, and then return that detainee to jail. However, in a letter obtained by First Alert 4 investigators, Sheriff Montgomery told city officials that his department will no longer perform that duty. This is a duty that the sheriff's department has been doing for decades. And remember, Alfred Montgomery is the newly elected sheriff as of January the 1st or 2nd of this year. He hasn't even been there 6 months yet. The mayor called this ludicrous and the timing of it to be dangerous. St. Louis Mayor Kara Spencer did not hold back in her conversation with First Alert 4 investigators about Sheriff Montgomery's decision to end the hospital transport detail with less than 2 weeks' notice. So this is something that's been going on for decades. This newly elected sheriff decides to end the detainee transport to hospitals, and then he gives them a 2-week notice. Something that's been going on for over 20 years, and then he just cuts the legs out from up under it within 2 weeks. You talk about some folks that have absolute power on the brain. This sounds a bit egregious in my opinion. You would think the mayor and the sheriff, one, they should be working together and be in alignment with each other when we're dealing with public safety of St. Louis citizens and or detainees. They're still human beings. So this sounds like a power struggle. So the mayor also said to just drop this on us at a time when our city is dealing with the worst calamity we have seen in my lifetime, and now to say that we are no longer able to transport people in our custody to much needed medical assistance. It's ludicrous, Mayor Spencer said. And the calamity she's talking about is the recent tornado that hit St. Louis on May 16th. So we already have a lot going on in the city right now. There are people that are suffering. There are people that it just increased the homeless rate. There are people that have been in their homes for decades, and now their homes were completely decimated. There are people that have health issues. They lost their medicines during the tornado and during the destruction. The stress alone could be devastating for people that are already medically compromised. And so all of these departments at City Hall should be concentrating on some kind of healthy restoration to restore our city back to where it needs to be. But you got this infighting going on. And so the sheriff's letter to the mayor cited budget issues as the reason the department must reevaluate its capacity to provide the service, a claim that Mayor Spencer dismisses. To cite overages, a good chunk of these dollars have been spent on lobbyists. The cost of the sheriff's office has exploded. There are many firings, and that costs the city significantly, Spencer said. The sheriff cites budget strain and staff shortages as the issue to why he wants to stop the medical transportation of detainees to hospitals. Montgomery told the Board of Aldermen on May 13th, and remember that's just 3 days before the tornado, that his department is short-staffed and financially stretched. He said that hospital transportation is no longer sustainable. He said we are currently having to pull deputies from courts and security to cover hospital details, pulling from overtime funds to incentivize deputies to cover these shifts. He said despite the staffing issues, Montgomery's office also requested thousands of dollars for golf carts. So he's saying that there's a budget shortfall. They're understaffed. As we all know, even in St. Louis, there's an understaffing of police officers in many of our departments. St. Louis needs about 500 police officers. Chicago needs about 2,000 to 3,000 police officers. And there's a trickle-down effect. Police officers, there's understaffing there. Then what is the trickle-down? Do you have an understaffing of correctional officers who are basically the police officers of the jail? And then there's an understaffing of sheriffs. who help in overseeing and protecting the public safety of the inmates and the detainees when they're being transferred, one from the to and from the hospital, to and from the courts. The sheriff's role is very important in the protection and safety and the welfare for all of us. And there's an understaffing for that. But he wants to buy more golf carts. That seems a little bit hubris, where if there's understaffing and there's underfunding, where are you finding the money to get golf carts? That doesn't make an ounce of sense to me. To transport equipment, make a run to the hospital, said Captain Blake Lawrence, an attorney for the sheriff's office. So they're saying despite the staffing issues, Sheriff Montgomery wants to spend thousands of dollars on golf carts to help transport equipment, make a run to the hospital. I thought they didn't want to do anything in the hospital, but that's what the golf carts are going to be used for. That request has drawn criticism, particularly as services are being cut. So what are the legal questions and historical precedent here? In his letter, Sheriff Montgomery argues that the hospital transport falls outside the statutory responsibilities of the sheriff's office. However, it's been going on for 25 years. He cited a 2002 memo from the city councilor's office suggesting that the duty belongs under the Department of Corrections. So we got the mayor's office, you have the Office of Public Safety, you have the Sheriff's Department, and then you have the Department of Corrections. All that falls under public safety. So is this a conversation piece where the Department of Corrections and the Sheriff's Department haven't been talking to each other along with the Director of Public Safety and the Mayor's office? This should have been taken care of a long time ago. But former Sheriff Vernon Betts, who Alfred Montgomery has been having an ongoing feud with. So Sheriff Betts had been the St. Louis City Sheriff for over a decade. He lost in the November election, and then Alfred Montgomery took over at the beginning of January. They have never gotten along. But former Sheriff Vernon Betts, who held the position for 8 years, almost a decade, he disagrees with Alfred Montgomery. He said, the history I know of the Sheriff's Department is that it's always been the responsibility of the Sheriff's Department to transport detainees to and from the hospital. For this guy to remove a responsibility that has been going on in the Sheriff's Department for over 2 decades and then to end it within 2 weeks, previous Sheriff Vernon Betts said it is kind of Donald Trumpian in a way. He said, is he Donald Trump or what? He just makes a decision that he's going to cease this responsibility from the Sheriff's Department that's been going on for 2 decades, and he's going to end it in 2 weeks. Ex-Sheriff Vernon Betts says that sounds egregious, arrogant, and kind of Donald Trumpian. Betts called the move egregious, accusing Montgomery of mismanaging staff and finances. He said, we've had this responsibility for years. Now, all of a sudden, this guy thinks he knows so much that he's going to reinvent the wheel. Come on, ex-Sheriff Vernon Betts said. Montgomery blamed the office's budget woes on payouts authorized by Betts before leaving office. So now we're doing the blame game. I told you that Alfred Montgomery, the new sheriff, and the old Sheriff Vernon Betts have been headbutting and don't get along at all. And it goes on to say that whatever problem he's having, he's wanting to blame it on Vernon Betts, talking about Sheriff Montgomery. He says, take the boot by the straps and handle your business. Quit blaming everything on everybody else, ex-Sheriff Vernon Betts said. He goes on to say that the Department of Corrections is caught in the middle. Here we go with that. Montgomery claims the Department of Corrections has both the funding and staffing to absorb the hospital transport duty. In a statement, the city's Department of Public Safety said the Division of Corrections remains steadfast in its commitment to the safety and well-being of both detainees and staff. This includes timely and appropriate transportation for medical care, all of which are met with the utmost priority and care. So as I told you, this all falls under public safety. So you have the Sheriff's Office and the Department of Corrections. Now, Mayor Kara Spence says that our folks have an enormous amount of responsibility getting this CJC to a place where we all feel confident that it's running the best it possibly can, she said, to saddle them with additional roles and responsibilities, and to thrust that upon them within a 2-week period is inhumane. She said, that's all I can say. First Alert 4 investigators requested an interview with Sheriff Montgomery. His office declined, saying he was unavailable, but they did provide a written statement. And that statement said, our decision prioritize legality, operational capacity, and the responsibility of the use of taxpayer dollars. The Department of Corrections holds an $8.8 million contract for prisoner medical services, $8.8 million. The Sheriff's Office received no funding for a hospital unit and also inherited nearly $250,000 in payouts to outgoing administrators authorized by former Sheriff Vernon Betts just 3 days before Montgomery took office. But there's been a lot going on. So there's all this confusion and back and forth that you see in politics all the time. And for the people that are listening that are from St. Louis, you should pay attention to this very closely. All of this falls under public safety. And with the understaffing of police officers, the understaffing of sheriff's officers, the understaffing of correctional officers can become a real issue from a public safety standpoint, both outside the jail and inside the jail. So this could trickle down and affect all of us. That's why this story is so important. But this new sheriff has, ever since he has taken office, he has had some real issues. There's been one videotape issue where there is a sheriff. Now remember, Alfred Montgomery is a black sheriff. There was a white sheriff up under him that has been going back and forth with Sheriff Montgomery on issues related to his job, and allegedly, and it's been recorded that Sheriff Montgomery had another sheriff roll a set of dice to see if he could roll a 7. He had 3 chances to do it to see if he could keep his job. And that has been recorded and is under investigation. There's been several other things that Sheriff Montgomery has had other sheriffs taking their children to and from school in sheriff vehicles while the sheriffs are on job time. Yes, I'm going to repeat it again. Sheriff Montgomery has been allowing his other sheriffs to take their children to and from school during work hours in sheriff vehicles and in uniform. That has been an issue. That has nothing to do with their departmental job whatsoever. So now there's been some federal scrutiny about this new Sheriff Montgomery. And again, he's only been in office 6 months. Where is this headed? So this is not the first time that Montgomery has drawn criticism. The St. Louis police confirmed that they have handed over information about the sheriff to the FBI, which is now conducting an investigation. This kind of reminds you a little bit of when our previous St. Louis Circuit Attorney, Kim Gardner, the black female who was the St. Louis City Circuit Attorney, she had all kinds of brush fires that were taking place and not getting detainees to court in an appropriate manner, where there was issues where people were charged with murder, with assaults, with first-degree robbery, second-degree robbery, some very serious charges. And these detainees were staying in jail for long periods of times. There was a backlog of over 2,000 cases that had not seen a courtroom. And that made, Kim Gardner made national news, and they had to literally, the city and the state of Missouri had to push her out. And this, you would think that Alfred Montgomery, who had seen this taking place with attorney Kim Gardner a few years ago, that you'd think he would dot every I and cross every T and not want to have all of this controversy going on and infighting with the mayor, who holds the highest position in the city. You also had, there's been other issues in City Hall, even with the building inspectors. You had a building inspector allegedly soliciting, when this gentleman was going on his inspections of businesses and buildings, he was trying to solicit funds for his nonprofit that he was associated with, and he was threatening if they didn't give donations, he was going to have their business shut down. And one was in particular was a daycare, another was a beauty salon. That's been under scrutiny, and in the building inspectors department. And of course, we know now that this tornado has taken place, the Department of Building Inspectors is going to be needed immediately. And they don't have enough building inspectors. That's understaffed. There are over 8,000 buildings that have been destroyed. And that's going to put a heavy burden on the building inspectors department. So you have this chaos going on in the sheriff's department. You had previous chaos going on in the circuit attorney's office. There's chaos and disruption going on in the building inspector's office. I can tell you what, I'm sure ex-mayor Tashara Jones, who was the first black female mayor in St. Louis, is probably glad that she did not get reelected. And for the new mayor, Kara Spencer, to come in and have to immediately deal with this issue with this tornado damage, this issue with Sheriff Alfred Montgomery. It seems like our local politicians are behaving like kids and not like responsible adults. We have to put pressure on our local politicians. We need to put pressure on our aldermanic board to make sure that they put pressure on the mayor. The mayor needs to put pressure on the governor to help with this tornado damage. But these different departments' heads need to get along. We're trying to service and take care of an entire city. And this kind of silliness that's going on between the mayor and the sheriff's department and the Department of Corrections seems to be undermining the health and welfare of our public safety. Tell me what you think about this issue with the St. Louis sheriff decides to end the inmate transportation, citing budget cuts, and then the mayor calls out and says that this move was ludicrous. There's a lot of immaturity going on in many of our city governments. Chicago is a mess. Atlanta has its issues, just to name a few. LA County, Los Angeles County has always had issues. And these politicians need to get along and run a healthy public safety department and make sure that our city is in a healthy state morally and ethically, and definitely from a physical and emotional standpoint. Tell me what you think. This has been the Trevor Donald Experience.